The orc woman standing before the viceroy's assembled court wore diplomatic silks that had been tailored 3 times to fit her frame, and she hated every stitch of them. Zara Calder had been sent from the northern orc settlements as a gesture of peace, a living symbol of the fragile treaty that kept the borderlands from erupting into war again. And she had been at this sprawling frontier estate for nearly 2 months now, smiling through banquets and pretending to enjoy conversations about hunting dogs and lineage. The viceroy's manor sat at the edge of civilized lands, a sprawling collection of timber and stone buildings that housed both rustic frontier practicality and imported luxury. And it was here that humans and orcs were supposed to learn to coexist. She found it exhausting. "Lady Calder, you look radiant this evening," Lord Percival Ashton said, appearing at her elbow with a bow that showed off his dress uniform. He was the 3rd son of a duke, sent to the borderlands to earn glory and political connections, and he had decided within a week of her arrival that marrying an orc diplomat would be exactly the sort of bold move that would make his name at the capital. He was handsome in the way humans measured such things, with golden hair and sharp features, and he clearly expected her to be flattered by his attention. "You are kind to say so," Zara replied, keeping her voice neutral. Her tusks, small and carefully filed in the orcish feminine style, showed slightly when she spoke. Her green skin had been powdered by her attendants to a softer shade, though she had refused to let them do anything about her pointed ears. There were limits to diplomacy. "I hope you will save me a dance later," Percival continued. "I have been practicing the traditional orcish partnering you taught us. I believe I have finally mastered the footwork." She doubted that very much, but she nodded. "Perhaps. I find these gatherings rather tiring. I may retire early." "Retire? But the evening has barely begun." He looked genuinely disappointed, which might have been charming if she felt any attraction to him whatsoever. "Surely you would not deprive us of your company so soon." "I have correspondence to attend to," she said, which was a lie. "Please excuse me." She made her escape before he could protest further, slipping through a side door that led away from the main ballroom. The corridors of the manor were quieter here, lit by oil lamps rather than the glittering chandeliers of the public spaces. She walked with purpose, her silk skirts rustling, until she reached the back stairs that led down to the working areas of the estate. The workshop was in a converted stable building, far enough from the main house that the noise would not disturb the delicate sensibilities of visiting nobility. Zara could hear the sound of metal on metal as she approached, a steady rhythm that was infinitely more soothing than the string quartet playing in the ballroom. She pushed open the door without knocking. The man inside looked up from his workbench, his hand stilling on the brass mechanism he had been adjusting. He was in his early 30s, she guessed, with brown hair that fell across his forehead, and the kind of build that came from years of detailed handwork rather than combat or field labor. He wore a leather apron over plain clothes, and there was a smudge of oil on his cheek. "Running away again?" Connor Jensen asked, setting down his tools. His voice was dry, amused. "That is the 3rd time this week." "Lord Ashton was complimenting my appearance," Zara said, closing the door behind her. "I could not bear another minute of it. How terrible for you being complimented." Connor picked up a cloth and wiped his hands. "Most people would consider that a pleasant experience." "He does not actually see me. He sees a political opportunity dressed in silk." She moved closer to the workbench, examining the half-assembled clock mechanism spread across its surface. "What are you working on?" "The tower clock. It has been running 3 minutes slow for the past week." The viceroy noticed and sent down a very stern message about the importance of punctuality. He gestured to the array of gears and springs. One of the escapement wheels is worn. I am fabricating a replacement. Zara leaned over the bench, genuinely interested now. You are making it by hand. I thought such things were cast in molds. They are, if you have access to a proper foundry and do not mind waiting 6 weeks for the part to arrive from the capital. I do not have that luxury, so I make do. He picked up a small brass wheel, holding it up to the lamplight. See. The teeth need to be absolutely uniform or the timing will be off. It took me 4 tries to get this one right. May I? She held out her hand and he passed her the gear. She turned it slowly, admiring the precision of the work. Each tooth was identical, filed and polished until the metal gleamed. This is beautiful. It is functional, Connor corrected, but she could hear the pleasure in his voice. Beauty is a side effect of good craftsmanship, not the goal. I disagree. Something made well is beautiful by definition. She handed the gear back. Among my people there is a saying, a thing that works poorly is ugly, no matter how much gold you plate it with. I like that. He set the gear down carefully. You should tell that to the viceroy. Half the mechanical items in this manor are gorgeous to look at and completely impractical. Do you know he has a clockwork bird that is supposed to sing on the hour? It has not worked properly in 3 years, but he keeps it on display because it has rubies for eyes. And you have not fixed it. He has never asked me to. I think he prefers the idea of having it to the reality of maintaining it. Connor began gathering his tools. Should you not be at the ball? I thought tonight was some sort of important dinner. It is a banquet honoring the harvest season. Very important to the humans here. They will drink too much wine and make speeches about prosperity and unity, and Lord Ashton will find excuses to stand near me and talk about his family's estates. Zara sighed. I would much rather stay here and watch you work. That might cause a scandal. Everything I do causes a scandal. Yesterday I was scolded for eating with my hands at breakfast. Apparently it is barbaric, even though I was eating bread and fruit. She pulled up a stool and sat down, clearly intending to stay. Tell me how a clock escapement works. I have always wondered, but I have never met anyone who could explain it properly. Connor studied her for a moment, as if trying to decide whether she was serious. Whatever he saw in her expression must have satisfied him, because he pulled the clock mechanism closer and began to point out the various components. The escapement is the heart of any mechanical timepiece, he began. It controls the release of energy from the mainspring, converting it into precise, regular movements. This wheel here catches on this lever, which rocks back and forth with the motion of the pendulum. Each time it rocks, it allows exactly 1 tooth to pass. That is what creates the ticking sound. Zara listened intently, asking questions when she did not understand. Connor answered them all with the same careful precision he brought to his work, never condescending or impatient. Time passed without either of them noticing, the noise from the distant ballroom fading into irrelevance. You have a gift for teaching, Zara said eventually. Have you ever considered taking apprentices? I had one several years ago, a boy from the village. He showed real promise. Connor's expression shifted, becoming more guarded. He left when his father arranged a merchant apprenticeship instead. Better prospects, apparently. Clockmaking is not a path to wealth. But it is honest work that requires real skill. That should count for something. Should does not always. He began packing away his tools, the easy flow of their conversation disrupted by something Zara could not quite identify. It is getting late. You should return to the manor before someone notices you are missing. Let them notice. I am not a prisoner here. No, but you are a diplomat and your absence will be remarked upon. Connor's tone was still pleasant, but there was a firmness to it now. Lord Ashton will worry that he has offended you. The viceroy will worry that the alliance is in jeopardy. It is not fair to either of them." Zara wanted to argue, but she knew he was right. She stood reluctantly. "Will you be here tomorrow?" "I am always here. Locks and clocks do not fix themselves." "Then I will visit again if you do not mind the company." "I do not mind." He met her eyes, and something in his gaze made her breath catch. "You are always welcome in my workshop, Lady Calder." "Zara," she said. "When we are alone, please call me Zara." He nodded slowly. "Zara then, and I am Connor, though you already know that." She left before she could say something foolish, slipping back through the darkened corridors toward the manor. The ballroom was still ablaze with light and music when she returned, and Lord Ashton immediately appeared at her side, relief evident on his face. "There you are. I was beginning to think you had truly abandoned us." He offered his arm. "Come, the dancing is about to begin. I insist you allow me to partner you for the first set." Zara allowed herself to be led onto the dance floor, smiling and nodding at all the right moments. But her mind was elsewhere, back in a workshop that smelled of oil and metal, talking to a man who treated her like a person rather than a symbol. Over the following weeks, Zara's visits to the workshop became a regular occurrence. She would endure the morning's diplomatic obligations, smile through luncheons and afternoon teas, and then escape to the converted stable building whenever she could manage it. Connor never seemed surprised to see her, though he often teased her about her timing. "You have an uncanny ability to arrive exactly when I am working on something interesting," he said one afternoon, as she watched him disassemble an ornate padlock that had stopped functioning. "If I were a suspicious man, I would think you were spying on me." "Perhaps I am," Zara replied, peering at the lock's internal mechanism. "Perhaps my people sent me here to steal all your human locksmithing secrets. Then you will be disappointed. This lock is deliberately designed to be difficult to pick, but the mechanism is actually quite simple. See these pins? They need to align at exactly the right height for the lock to open, but the third pin is corroded, so it is sticking." He showed her how to remove the damaged pin, then how to file and polish a replacement. His hands were steady and sure, and Zara found herself watching the way his fingers moved almost as much as she watched the work itself. "You could have been a surgeon," she said. "You have the right temperament for it. Steady hands and patience. I prefer to work with metal. It is more predictable than flesh." He tested the new pin, nodding in satisfaction. "Besides, I do not have the education for medicine. That requires years of formal training and money for university. I learned my trade from my father, who learned it from his father. We are craftsmen, not scholars." There was no bitterness in his voice, only simple fact. But Zara detected something underneath it, some old wound that had never quite healed. She filed the observation away, not wanting to pry. "Your father must have been an excellent teacher," she said instead. "He was. He died when I was 19, but by then he had taught me everything he knew." Connor reassembled the lock with swift, economical movements. "My mother followed him 2 years later. After that, it was just me and my sister, and she married a farmer and moved to the coast. I have not seen her in 5 years. That must be lonely." "It is what it is." He tested the lock, and it opened with a satisfying click. "I have my work, and I have the respect of the people who need my services. That is enough." Zara wanted to argue that it was not enough, that everyone needed more than just their work to give life meaning. But she had no right to judge his choices, so she changed the subject. "Lord Ashton asked me to walk with him in the gardens this morning," she said. "He wanted to show me the new fountain the Viceroy had installed. It is supposed to be very impressive." "Is it? I have no idea. I told him I was feeling unwell and sent my apologies." She grinned, showing her tusks. "I suspect I will feel unwell quite often when he suggests garden walks." Connor looked at her seriously. You should be careful about that. Lord Ashton is not a bad man, and he seems genuinely interested in you. Refusing him too blatantly might cause diplomatic problems. You sound like my attendants. They lecture me constantly about propriety and appearances. Zara's good mood evaporated. Everyone is very concerned about what Lord Ashton wants. No one seems to care what I want. What do you want? The question was so direct, so unlike the careful diplomatic language she had been navigating for months, that Zara found herself answering honestly. I want to go home. I want to stop pretending that I enjoy balls and banquets. I want to have conversations that matter with people who are not constantly calculating how my words might affect trade agreements. She met his eyes. I want to spend time with someone who sees me as Zara, not as Lady Calder the orc diplomat. The silence that followed was heavy with unspoken things. Connor set down the lock he had been holding. I see you as Zara, he said quietly. I have since the first time you walked into my workshop and started asking questions about gear ratios. You could have been anyone, any species, and I would have appreciated your curiosity and your willingness to learn. Thank you, Zara said, and meant it more than she had meant any of the pretty diplomatic phrases she had been trading in for weeks. That means more to me than you know. Before either of them could say anything more, the workshop door opened and one of the manor stewards appeared, looking harried. Lady Calder, there you are. Lord Ashton has been searching for you. He says the Viceroy wishes to speak with you urgently about the grain shipment negotiations. Zara suppressed a sigh. Of course, tell them I will be there shortly. The steward bowed and disappeared. Zara stood reluctantly, brushing off her skirts. Duty calls, she said. Will I see you at dinner tonight? The Viceroy sometimes invites you to the formal meals. Only when he wants to impress someone with his enlightened attitude toward commoners, Connor said dryly. But yes, I received an invitation for this evening. Apparently there is some sort of announcement. I will look forward to it then. At least I will have one person at the table who does not bore me. She left before he could respond, hurrying back toward the manor. But she carried the warmth of his words with her, a small light against the tedium of diplomacy. That evening's dinner was indeed a formal affair, with the Viceroy's best china and silverware on display. Zara found herself seated between Lord Ashton and a minor noble from a neighboring estate, both of whom seemed determined to monopolize her attention. Connor was at the far end of the table, relegated to the section where the Viceroy seated people who were respectable but not titled. He caught her eye once and raised his wine glass in a subtle salute. She returned the gesture, hoping no one else noticed. The announcement, when it came, was delivered by the Viceroy himself during the dessert course. He stood and tapped his glass for silence, beaming at his assembled guests. My friends, I am delighted to share news that I believe will strengthen the bonds between our peoples and secure the prosperity of this region for generations to come. He paused for dramatic effect. It is my great pleasure to inform you that negotiations have been progressing most favorably regarding a formal alliance between the northern Orc settlements and the Eastern Duchy. And to cement this alliance, I am honored to propose a match between Lady Zara Calder and Lord Percival Ashton. The table erupted in applause and congratulations. Zara sat frozen, her wine glass halfway to her lips. Lord Ashton turned to her, smiling broadly, clearly having known about this beforehand. I know this is somewhat sudden, he said, pitching his voice low enough that only she could hear over the noise. But I assure you, I hold you in the highest regard. I believe we could build a strong partnership together, one that would benefit both our peoples. I was not consulted about this, Zara said, keeping her voice level through sheer force of will. This is the first I am hearing of any such arrangement. Surely your council discussed it with you before you came here. This was always the intended outcome of the diplomatic season. Ashton looked genuinely confused. I assumed you knew. Zara did not trust herself to speak. She had known in the abstract that her presence here was partly to evaluate potential political marriages, but she had not expected the decision to be announced publicly without her explicit consent. She glanced down the table toward Connor and found him staring at his plate, his expression carefully blank. The viceroy was still talking, something about wedding dates and state ceremonies. The other nobles were offering their congratulations, treating the matter as settled. Zara felt the walls closing in, the weight of duty and expectation pressing down on her shoulders. She stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. The room fell silent. "Excuse me," she said. "I find I am not feeling well. Please continue without me." She walked out before anyone could stop her, moving quickly through the corridors until she reached her chambers. Her attendants tried to follow, but she shut the door in their faces and locked it, then stood in the middle of the room trying to remember how to breathe. A political marriage. Of course. That was what she was here for, what she had always been here for. Lord Ashton was handsome and well-connected and apparently willing to marry an orc for the sake of his career. It was a perfectly reasonable arrangement. It would secure trade routes and military cooperation, and all the other practical benefits that treaties were built on. And it made her want to scream. She crossed to the window and pushed it open, breathing in the cool night air. Below, she could see the lights of the workshop building, a single lamp burning in Connor's window. She wondered if he had finished his dinner or if he had made his own escape. She wondered if he cared that she was about to be engaged to someone else. She wondered why it mattered so much to her what he thought. A knock at the door interrupted her spiraling thoughts. She ignored it at first, but the knocking persisted, accompanied by her chief attendant's worried voice. "Lady Calder, please. The Viceroy wishes to speak with you." He is concerned that he has overstepped. At least he had the grace to be concerned. Zara unlocked the door but did not open it fully, keeping herself partially hidden. "Tell the Viceroy that I will speak with him in the morning when I have had time to collect myself. And tell Lord Ashton that I appreciate his regard, but I have not agreed to any betrothal. But my lady, the announcement has been made. To refuse now would be a grave insult. Then perhaps the Viceroy should have consulted me before making announcements about my future." Zara's voice was sharp enough that her attendant took a step back. "I will speak with him in the morning. Good night." She closed and locked the door again, then leaned against it, suddenly exhausted. Tomorrow she would have to face the consequences of her outburst. Tomorrow she would have to navigate the complex politics of refusing a betrothal that had been publicly announced. Tomorrow she would have to decide what she actually wanted, rather than what everyone else expected of her. But tonight, she just wanted to be left alone. Sleep did not come easily. Zara lay awake for hours, staring at the ceiling and trying to untangle her thoughts. The diplomatic part of her mind understood the logic of the match. Lord Ashton was from a good family, he had military experience, and he seemed genuinely willing to treat her with respect. The marriage would be advantageous for her people, opening doors that had been closed for generations. But the rest of her recoiled from the idea. She barely knew Ashton beyond his public persona. She had no idea what he was like when he was not performing for an audience, what he cared about beyond his career, what made him laugh or what he feared. She could not imagine sharing her life with him, growing old with him, raising children with him. When she thought about the future, the image that came to mind was not of a grand estate and political maneuvering. It was of a workshop that smelled of oil and metal, of steady hands working on intricate mechanisms, of dry humor and honest conversation. It was Connor. The realization hit her with the force of a physical blow. She had fallen in love with the clockmaker, so gradually that she had not noticed it happening until the possibility of losing him became real. She loved the way he explained things with such patience, the pride he took in his work, the way he treated her as an equal rather than as something exotic or political. She loved his quiet competence and his refusal to be impressed by rank or title. And she had absolutely no idea if he felt the same way, or if he saw her as just a friendly acquaintance who happened to visit his workshop too often. Morning came too soon and brought with it a summons to meet with the viceroy. Zara dressed carefully, choosing a practical day gown rather than the elaborate diplomatic outfits her attendants tried to push on her. If she was going to have this conversation, she would do it as herself, not as the image of an orc diplomat. The viceroy received her in his private study, a smaller room than the grand reception hall where he usually conducted business. He looked tired, and Zara felt a small stab of guilt. She had made his life more difficult with her dramatic exit, and he had not truly meant any harm. "Lady Calder, please sit. I owe you an apology." He gestured to a chair across from his desk. "I handled last night's announcement poorly. I had believed, based on my correspondence with your counsel, that you were aware of and amenable to the proposed match. Clearly, there was a miscommunication." "What exactly did my counsel tell you?" Zara asked, sitting down. "Because they certainly did not tell me that I was expected to marry Lord Ashton." The viceroy pulled out a letter and passed it to her. "This arrived 3 weeks ago. As you can see, they express strong support for a formal alliance through marriage and indicate that you have full authority to negotiate the terms." Zara read the letter, her jaw tightening. It was carefully worded, as all council communications were, but the implication was clear. They expected her to marry someone advantageous, and they expected her to do it without complaint. The fact that they had not bothered to discuss it with her directly spoke volumes about how much they valued her opinion. "I see," she said, handing the letter back. "And Lord Ashton? When did he learn of this arrangement?" "I approached him 2 weeks ago after receiving this letter. He was very enthusiastic about the possibility." The viceroy folded his hands on the desk. "Lady Calder, I understand if you have reservations. Political marriages are rarely love matches, at least not at the beginning. But Lord Ashton is a good man, and I believe he would treat you well. The alliance would benefit both your people and ours significantly." "I am sure it would, but I am not a commodity to be traded for political advantage." Zara met his eyes steadily. "I will not agree to a betrothal that was arranged without my knowledge or consent. If Lord Ashton wishes to court me properly, with the understanding that I may refuse him, then we can discuss the matter. But I will not be announced as his intended bride before I have made my own decision." The viceroy looked at her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "That is fair. I will speak with Lord Ashton and explain the situation. I must warn you, though, that refusing him outright would cause significant diplomatic complications. Your council has already sent word to the capital that the alliance is proceeding. If it falls through now, there will be questions and possibly repercussions. Then my council should have consulted me before making promises on my behalf." Zara stood. "I appreciate your understanding, Viceroy. I will speak with Lord Ashton myself, once I have decided what to say to him." She left the study with her head high, refusing to let anyone see how shaken she was. The situation was worse than she had realized. Her own people were pushing for this marriage, which meant that refusing it would not be as simple as telling Ashton no. There would be political consequences, possibly for her personally. She needed advice, and there was only one person she wanted to talk to. Connor was in his workshop, as she had known he would be. He was working on a door lock this time, his tools spread across the workbench. He looked up when she entered, and something in his expression told her that he had been expecting her. "You heard about last night," she said. It was not a question. The whole estate heard about last night, servants' gossip. He set down his tools. "Are you all right?" "I do not know." Zara closed the door and leaned against it. "My counsel arranged a betrothal without telling me. The Viceroy announced it publicly without asking my permission. And Lord Ashton seems to think we are now engaged, despite the fact that I have never agreed to any such thing. What are you going to do?" "I told the Viceroy I will not honor a betrothal I did not consent to, but my council will be angry, and there may be political consequences." She moved closer to the workbench, needing something to do with her hands. "I feel like I am trapped in a mechanism that I do not understand, and everyone keeps turning gears without explaining how it works." Connor was quiet for a moment, studying her face. Then he said, "Do you want to marry Lord Ashton?" "No." The word came out more forcefully than she had intended. "No, I do not. I barely know him. He is perfectly pleasant, I suppose, but I have no desire to spend my life with him." "Then do not." "It is not that simple. This marriage would secure important trade agreements. It would improve relations between our peoples. Refusing could harm my own people's interests." "Your people's interests, or your council's ambitions?" Connor's voice was gentle but pointed. "Because from where I am standing, it looks like you are being asked to sacrifice your happiness for the sake of politics. And I have to wonder if the benefits are really as essential as they claim, or if your council just wants the prestige of having one of their own marry into human nobility." Zara stared at him. No one had questioned the narrative that this marriage was necessary for her people. Everyone had simply accepted it as fact, including her. "You think they are exaggerating the benefits?" "I think people who want something often exaggerate how necessary it is." Connor picked up a screwdriver and turned it over in his hands. "But I am just a clockmaker. I do not understand politics or diplomacy. Maybe I am completely wrong." "You are not wrong." Zara felt something loosen in her chest, a tension she had not realized she was carrying. "You are absolutely right. My council wants this marriage because it makes them look important. The actual trade benefits could probably be negotiated separately, if anyone bothered to try." "So what are you going to do?" Zara looked at him, at his steady hands and his honest face, and made a decision. "I am going to refuse the betrothal, publicly if necessary. And then I am going to face whatever consequences come from that decision. That takes courage, or foolishness. I am not sure which." She managed a smile. "Will you come to dinner tonight?" "I expect it will be awkward, and I would feel better knowing there is at least one person there who is on my side." Connor hesitated, and Zara saw something flicker across his face, some emotion she could not quite read. But then he nodded. "If you want me there, I will come. I do, very much." She left the workshop feeling lighter than she had in days, despite knowing that the hard part was still ahead of her. But at least now she knew what she was fighting for. Not duty or politics or her council's ambitions. Just the simple right to choose her own future. Lord Ashton found her that afternoon in the Manor's library, where she had been hiding from her attendants and trying to draft a letter to her council. He knocked politely before entering, his expression troubled. "Lady Calder, may I speak with you?" "Of course." Zara set aside her half-written letter. "I imagine we have much to discuss." He took the chair across from her, and for the first time since she had met him, he looked genuinely uncertain. "The Viceroy told me that you were not informed about the betrothal announcement beforehand. I want to apologize. I assumed you knew and had given your consent. I would never have agreed to a public announcement otherwise. I appreciate that. Zara folded her hands in her lap. But even if I had been informed, I would not have agreed to the betrothal. I am sorry if that is disappointing, but I do not wish to marry you. Ashton flinched slightly, but he kept his composure. May I ask why? Have I done something to offend you? I know I can be overly formal at times, but I assure you that is merely habit from my military training. I would treat you with the greatest respect and consideration. You have not offended me, and I believe you would be a considerate husband. Zara chose her words carefully. But respect and consideration are not enough for a marriage. I do not know you, Lord Ashton. I do not know what you value or what you fear or what makes you laugh, and I suspect you do not really know me either. You see an advantageous political match, which is understandable, but I need more than that. I see. He was quiet for a moment, processing her words. Is there someone else? Zara considered lying but decided he deserved honesty. I do not know, perhaps, but even if there were not, I would still refuse this betrothal. I will not marry for politics alone. Your counsel will not be pleased. My counsel will survive. She met his eyes. I am sorry, Lord Ashton. You deserve someone who genuinely wants to marry you, not someone who is doing it out of duty. He stood, and she thought she saw a flash of genuine hurt in his expression before he schooled it back to neutrality. I understand. Thank you for your honesty, at least. I will inform the Viceroy that the betrothal is cancelled. I will speak with him as well, and with my council. I do not want you to bear the blame for this. Ashton nodded and left without another word. Zara sat alone in the library for a long time after he was gone, feeling the weight of what she had just done. She had refused a politically advantageous match, disappointed her council, and potentially damaged her people's relationship with the frontier settlements. All because she wanted the freedom to choose her own path. She hoped desperately that it was the right decision. Dinner that night was exactly as awkward as Zara had anticipated. The Viceroy made polite conversation about neutral topics, carefully avoiding any mention of betrothals or alliances. Lord Ashton was absent, having sent his regrets, and several of the other noble guests kept shooting curious glances at Zara. Clearly the news had spread. But Connor was there, seated in his usual place at the lower end of the table, and every time Zara felt overwhelmed by the strained atmosphere, she looked at him and felt steadier. He did not do anything dramatic, did not even speak to her directly. But his presence was a reminder that not everyone at this estate measured her worth by her political connections. After dinner, she found him in one of the manor's less formal sitting rooms, examining a broken clock that someone had left on a side table. He looked up when she entered, a slight smile crossing his face. I see you survived the meal. I was beginning to wonder if the tension might be thick enough to cut with a knife. It was close. Zara sank into a chair near him. Lord Ashton sent his regrets. I think he is avoiding me. Can you blame him? Being refused in front of half the frontier nobility cannot be pleasant. I did not refuse him publicly. I did that privately this afternoon. She watched Connor's hands as he poked at the clock mechanism. But yes, I imagine it still stings. I did not want to hurt him. You did the right thing, Connor said firmly. Marrying someone you do not love just to spare their feelings would be worse for everyone involved. I hope my council sees it that way. Zara leaned back in her chair. I will have to write to them and explain. And I expect they will send someone to haul me home in disgrace. Would that be so terrible, going home? Yes and no. Zara considered the question. I miss my people and my home, but I do not miss being told what to do at every turn. And if I go back now, after refusing this marriage, they will probably just try to arrange another one, someone even more politically useful to make up for this failure. Connor set down the clock carefully. Then do not go back. Stay here. As what? I am a diplomat. If I am not conducting diplomacy, what purpose do I serve? You could serve your own purpose. Connor turned to face her fully. You are intelligent and curious. You could do anything you wanted if you stopped letting others define your value. That is easy for you to say. You have a skill that people need. I am trained in diplomacy and negotiation, which are only useful in political contexts. So learn a new skill. You have been watching me work for months now. You understand the basic principles of mechanical systems. I could teach you properly if you wanted to learn. Zara stared at him. You would do that. Teach me your trade, why not? You already ask better questions than most apprentices I have met, and I could use the help. The Viceroy keeps assigning me more projects than one person can reasonably handle. The offer was so unexpected, so generous, that Zara did not know how to respond. I do not know what to say. That would be a significant commitment of your time. I am aware. Connor's expression was serious now, intent. But I would not offer if I did not mean it. You are the first person in years who has been genuinely interested in what I do, not just in what I can fix for them. That is worth something to me. Thank you, Zara said softly. That is one of the kindest offers anyone has ever made me. Does that mean you will consider it? I will more than consider it. Yes, if you are willing to teach me, I would very much like to learn. Connor's smile was brighter than she had ever seen it, and Zara felt an answering warmth spread through her chest. Maybe refusing the betrothal had closed some doors, but it seemed to have opened others. And she found that she was genuinely excited about what might come next, in a way she had not been about anything in a long time. Over the next several weeks, Zara's life settled into a new pattern. She still attended the necessary diplomatic functions, but she spent most of her time in Connor's workshop, learning the basics of his trade. He was a patient teacher, showing her how to use various tools, explaining the principles behind different lock and clock mechanisms, and gradually trusting her with more complex tasks. You have good hands for this work, he told her one afternoon as she carefully filed a rough edge off a brass gear. Steady and precise. Some people are too heavy-handed. They force things and end up breaking delicate components. I am terrified of breaking something, Zara admitted. Everything you make is so intricate. I keep thinking I will sneeze and ruin hours of work. You will break things eventually. Everyone does. The key is learning how to fix your mistakes. He leaned over to check her progress. That looks good. Try fitting it into the assembly. She did, and to her delight, the gear slid into place perfectly, meshing with the neighboring teeth without any resistance. Connor nodded approvingly. See, you are learning faster than you think. They fell into an easy rhythm, working side by side in comfortable silence broken by occasional questions or observations. Zara found that she loved the work, the way it demanded complete focus and rewarded precision. There was something deeply satisfying about taking a broken object and making it function again, about understanding exactly how and why each component contributed to the whole. But more than the work itself, she loved spending time with Connor. As the weeks passed, their conversations ranged far beyond clocks and locks, touching on everything from childhood memories to philosophical questions about craftsmanship and value. She learned that he had once been engaged to a noblewoman from a nearby estate, a relationship that had ended badly when the woman's father arranged a more lucrative match. Her name was Clarissa, Connor said one evening, when the conversation had somehow turned to past romances. We had known each other since childhood. Her family was not wealthy, but they had a title and some land. I thought she loved me for who I was, not for what I could provide. I was wrong. What happened? A merchant from the capital came to the estate looking to buy property in the region. He was newly wealthy and wanted to invest in land to gain social standing. Clarissa's father saw an opportunity and arranged a betrothal. Connor's hand stilled on the lock he had been working on. She did not even tell me herself. I found out when I went to visit her and discovered she had left for the capital the day before to prepare for her wedding. That is terrible. I am so sorry. It was a long time ago, 5 years now. He resumed working, but Zara could see the tension in his shoulders. I learned a valuable lesson from it, though. People with rank and title do not marry down. They might enjoy the company of someone beneath their station, might even feel genuine affection. But when it comes time to make a permanent choice, they always choose advantage over love. Zara felt her stomach twist. She understood now why Connor had been hesitant about teaching her, why he sometimes seemed to pull back just when they were growing closer. He saw her as another Clarissa, someone who would inevitably leave him for someone more suitable. Not everyone is like that, she said carefully. Some people value loyalty and honesty over political advantage. Perhaps, but those people are rare, especially among the nobility. He met her eyes and she saw old pain there, carefully walled off but never fully healed. I do not blame you for refusing Lord Ashton, and I am glad you did. But I expect eventually your council will find someone you cannot refuse, someone who represents an opportunity too important to pass up. And when that happens, you will go, because that is what people in your position do. You do not know that. Do I not? You are an important person, Zara. You have responsibilities to your people, obligations that go beyond your personal preferences. Sooner or later, those obligations will matter more than anything else, including whatever friendship we have built here. Zara wanted to argue, to insist that he was wrong about her. But a letter had arrived that morning from her council, expressing their deep disappointment about the failed betrothal and suggesting several alternative candidates they thought might be suitable. She had not mentioned the letter to Connor, but it hung over her like a shadow, because part of what he said was true. She did have responsibilities, and her council was not going to let her ignore them forever. What if I told them no? She said. What if I refused every match they suggested and just stayed here? Then they would eventually send someone to bring you home, and you would have to choose between defying your entire council, possibly damaging your people's interests, or doing what they want. That is not really a choice at all. So I should just give up, accept that my life is not my own. I did not say that. Connor's voice was gentle. I am just trying to be realistic about the situation. You have more power than I do, but you are still constrained by circumstances beyond your control. We all are. The conversation left Zara feeling unsettled and frustrated. She understood Connor's caution, even sympathized with it given what he had been through. But it hurt that he seemed to have already decided that their relationship had a predetermined ending, one where she inevitably chose duty over him. The worst part was that she was not entirely sure he was wrong. Autumn deepened into early winter, and the diplomatic season began winding down. Many of the visiting nobles had already departed for their home estates, eager to be settled before the mountain passes became impassable. Zara's council sent increasingly pointed letters asking when she planned to return home. And Lord Ashton, who had remained cordial but distant since she had refused his proposal, announced that he would be leaving for the capital after the winter solstice celebration. You should be pleased, one of her attendants said, as they packed away summer clothes Zara would no longer need. Lord Ashton's departure removes an awkward situation. I was never worried about Lord Ashton, Zara replied, folding a silk scarf with more force than necessary. He has been perfectly civil. Still, You must be relieved that you will not have to navigate his presence much longer, unless you have reconsidered his proposal. It is not too late to. I have not reconsidered, and I will not. Please stop suggesting it." The attendant fell silent, but Zara could feel her disapproval. Everyone seemed to think she had made a terrible mistake refusing Ashton, that she had thrown away a valuable opportunity out of stubbornness or naivety. Only Connor had supported her decision without reservation, and he was now convinced that she would eventually be forced into a different political marriage anyway. The winter solstice celebration was to be the final major event of the diplomatic season, a grand ball that would serve as both a harvest thanksgiving and a farewell to the departing guests. The viceroy spared no expense, decorating the manor with evergreen boughs and winter flowers, and arranging for musicians from the capital. Zara approached the event with a mixture of resignation and dread. She would have to make polite conversation one last time, smile through speeches about cooperation and friendship, and pretend that everything was fine. Connor had been invited, of course, as the viceroy made a point of including him in major celebrations. But when Zara went to the workshop to confirm that he would attend, she found him unusually reluctant. "I am not sure I should go," he said, not meeting her eyes. "These events are not really for people like me. I only get invited because the viceroy wants to appear egalitarian." "I want you there," Zara said firmly. "Please, Connor, it will be the last time we are all together before people start leaving for the winter. I would like to have at least one person I can actually talk to. Lord Ashton will be there. It might be awkward. Lord Ashton is leaving in 3 days. I think we can manage one evening in the same room." She moved closer, catching his hand. "Please, I am asking as a friend." He looked at their joined hands for a long moment, then nodded. "All right, but if the evening becomes unbearable, I am leaving early and you cannot hold it against me." "Deal." The night of the solstice ball arrived cold and clear, with stars brilliant against the dark sky. Zara dressed in one of her finest gowns, a deep blue silk embroidered with silver thread, and allowed her attendants to arrange her hair in an elaborate style. If this was to be her last major appearance as a diplomat, she might as well look the part. The ballroom was stunning, transformed by candlelight and winter decorations into something almost magical. The musicians played softly as guests arrived, and servants circulated with trays of wine and delicate pastries. Zara accepted a glass of wine and positioned herself near one of the tall windows, where she could observe without being immediately drawn into conversation. She spotted Connor as soon as he entered, wearing what was probably his best coat, but still looking slightly out of place among the elaborate finery of the noble guests. He found her quickly, as if drawn by some invisible thread, and took up a position at her side. "You look beautiful," he said quietly, "like winter moonlight." Zara felt heat rise in her cheeks. "That is quite poetic for a clockmaker. I have my moments." He accepted a glass of wine from a passing servant. "How long do we have to stay?" "At least through dinner and the first round of dancing. After that, we can probably escape without causing too much offense." They fell into their usual easy conversation, commenting quietly on the other guests and the elaborate decorations. But there was an undercurrent of tension now, a awareness that time was running out. Soon the diplomatic season would end, and Zara would have to make a decision about her future. And Connor, for all his careful distance, clearly cared what that decision would be. Dinner was announced, and they made their way to the dining hall. The seating arrangements had been carefully planned, with Zara positioned between the viceroy and a visiting dignitary, and Connor at the far end of the table again. But she caught his eye several times during the meal, and each time he raised his glass slightly in that private salute that had become their signal. After dinner, the dancing began. Lord Ashton appeared at Zara's side almost immediately, bowing formally. "Lady Calder, would you do me the honor of one final dance? For old time's sake." There was no graceful way to refuse, so Zara accepted his hand and allowed him to lead her onto the floor. The music was a traditional waltz, and Ashton was an excellent dancer, guiding her through the steps with practiced ease. "I want to apologize again for the awkwardness I caused," he said as they turned. "I should have insisted on speaking with you privately before agreeing to any announcement." "You have already apologized, and I have already forgiven you. Let it go." Zara smiled to soften the words. "Are you looking forward to returning to the capital?" "Yes and no. I will be glad to see my family again, but I admit this posting has been more interesting than I expected. I learned a great deal about the borderlands and about your people. I hope those lessons will serve you well in the future." "I hope so too." He was quiet for a moment, then said, "May I ask you something personal?" "That depends on the question." "The clockmaker, Connor Jensen. Are you in love with him?" Zara missed a step, and Ashton smoothly adjusted to keep them in rhythm. "What makes you ask that?" "The way you look at him. The way he looks at you when he thinks no one is watching. The fact that you spend most of your time in his workshop." Ashton's expression was more curious than accusing. "It is fairly obvious, at least to anyone paying attention." Zara considered denying it, but she was tired of pretending. "Yes, I am in love with him." "Does he know?" "I have not told him. I am not sure it would make a difference if I did. He does not believe that someone like me would choose someone like him permanently. He thinks I will eventually marry for political reasons and leave him behind." "Will you?" "I do not want to, but I also do not want to damage my people's interests out of selfishness." Zara met his eyes. "That is the problem, is it not? Duty and desire rarely align and someone always gets hurt." "True." Ashton guided her through a turn. "But speaking as someone who has spent his life serving duty, I can tell you that it is a cold companion in the end. Alliances and treaties matter, but so does personal happiness. If you have found someone you love who loves you in return, that is worth fighting for. Even if it means disappointing people who are counting on me, especially then. Because you are the one who has to live with your choices, not them." The music began to wind down. "For what it is worth, I think Connor Jensen is a lucky man, whether he knows it or not, and I think you would be happy with him in a way you never could have been with me." The dance ended, and Ashton bowed formally before returning her to the edge of the floor. Zara stood for a moment, processing his words. Then she looked around the ballroom until she spotted Connor standing near one of the decorated columns, watching her with an expression she could not quite read. She made a decision. She crossed the ballroom directly, ignoring the curious glances that followed her. Connor straightened as she approached, clearly sensing that something had changed. "Zara, is everything all right?" "No," she said. "Nothing is all right. I am in love with you, and I am tired of pretending otherwise." He stared at her, frozen. "What?" "I love you. I have loved you for weeks now, possibly longer. I love your patience and your honesty and the way you see me as a person rather than as a political symbol. I love watching you work and listening to you explain how mechanisms fit together. I love the way you make me laugh and the way you challenge me when you think I am wrong." She took a breath. "And I am not going to marry some other man just because it is politically convenient. I am choosing you if you will have me." The ballroom had gone quiet around them. Zara realized dimly that people were staring, that she had just made a very public declaration. But she did not care. She was done hiding, done being diplomatic, done putting everyone else's needs ahead of her own. Connor's face had gone through several expressions during her speech: shock, hope, disbelief, fear. Now he just looked stunned. "Zara, you cannot mean that. Your council, my council, can accept my decision or they can replace me with another diplomat. I do not particularly care which. She stepped closer. I know you have been hurt before. I know you do not trust that someone like me would choose someone like you, but I am not Clarissa, and I am not going to leave you for a better match. You are the match I want, Connor. You are the person I want to build a life with. You are making a scene, he said weakly. I know. I am terrible at diplomacy. She reached for his hand. Tell me I have not completely misread this situation. Tell me you feel something for me too, or I am going to be extremely embarrassed. Connor looked at her and something in his expression cracked. All the careful distance he had been maintaining, all the walls he had built against being hurt again, came tumbling down. Of course I feel something for you, he said hoarsely. I have been half in love with you since the first week you walked into my workshop. But I never thought I did not believe that you would actually. Zara did not let him finish. She pulled him close and kissed him, there in the middle of the Viceroy's winter ball, in front of the entire assembled court. She heard gasps and whispers, heard someone laugh in delight, but none of it mattered. All that mattered was Connor's arms coming around her, his hands gentle against her back, the way he kissed her like she was something precious and worth fighting for. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, the ballroom erupted in a mixture of applause and scandalized muttering. The Viceroy looked stunned. Lord Ashton was smiling, actually smiling, and raised his glass in a salute, and Zara's attendants looked as if they might faint from sheer horror. I think you may have just ended your diplomatic career, Connor said, slightly dazed. Good. I was terrible at it anyway. Zara kept her hand firmly in his. I hope you meant what you said about teaching me your trade, because I am going to need a new profession. I meant it, though I should warn you that clockmaking does not come with diplomatic immunity or fancy gowns. I never liked the fancy gowns. She grinned at him, feeling lighter than she had in months. All I want is honest work and a life I chose for myself, preferably with you in it. You can definitely have that. Connor squeezed her hand, though we should probably leave before someone decides to lecture you about propriety. They made their escape through a side door, leaving the stunned court behind them. The night air was cold and sharp, and Zara breathed it in gratefully, feeling like she had just broken through the surface of deep water. She had just thrown away her diplomatic position, defied her council, and created a scandal that would be talked about for years, and she felt absolutely no regret. What happens now? Connor asked, as they walked toward his workshop through the quiet grounds. Your council will be furious. They may try to force you to return home. Let them try. I am an adult, not their property. They cannot actually force me to do anything. Zara leaned against his shoulder. I will write to them and explain my decision. They will threaten and bluster, but eventually they will have to accept it. And if they do not, well, I will find a new home elsewhere. You would do that, leave your people behind. I would leave the council behind, not my people. There is a difference. She stopped walking and turned to face him. Connor, I know this is all happening very fast. If you need time to think about what you want, I do not need time. I know what I want. He cupped her face gently. I want you. I have wanted you for longer than I was willing to admit. I just did not think I had the right to hope for this. You have every right. And now you are stuck with me, so I hope you are prepared for that. I think I can manage. He kissed her again, softer this time, full of promise. Though we should probably have a longer conversation about practical matters. Like where we are going to live, and how we are going to support ourselves, and what we are going to tell people when they ask how this happened. Tomorrow, Zara said firmly. We can figure out all the practical details tomorrow. Tonight, I just want to enjoy the fact that I finally made a choice for myself, and it was the right one. They spent the rest of the evening in Connor's workshop, talking and planning and occasionally kissing like the lovesick fools they were. The future was uncertain, and there would be challenges ahead. But for the first time in a long time, Zara felt genuinely excited about what was coming, rather than weighed down by obligation. The next few days were chaotic. Zara's attendants tried to convince her to reconsider, to apologize to the court, and salvage what remained of her diplomatic position. Her counsel sent a blistering letter demanding that she return home immediately and explaining in detail how much damage she had done to their reputation. The viceroy, caught between competing interests, tried to mediate but ultimately admitted that he could not force Zara to do anything she did not want to do. Through it all, Connor remained steady and supportive. He helped her compose a formal resignation from her diplomatic post, explaining her decision in clear, respectful terms that nonetheless made it clear she would not be changing her mind. He stood beside her when she met with the viceroy to discuss her departure from the manor, and he quietly began making arrangements for them to relocate to a larger town several days' travel away, where his skills would be in demand, and where they could start fresh without the weight of court politics hanging over them. "Are you sure about this?" Zara asked him one evening as they packed his tools in preparation for the move. "You have built a life here. You have regular clients and a good workshop. I do not want you to give that up because of me." "I am not giving anything up. I am choosing to build a different life, one that includes you." Connor wrapped a delicate timepiece in cloth. "Besides, I have been thinking about relocating for a while now. The viceroy keeps me busy, but he does not pay particularly well. In a proper town, I could take on better projects and maybe even expand into clockmaking rather than just repairs." "You want to make your own clocks?" "I have always wanted to. But it requires time and resources that I have never quite had. With two of us working together, though, and with your share from whatever diplomatic severance your council owes you, we could actually make it work." Zara liked the sound of that. A shared workshop, a shared life, built on their own terms rather than anyone else's expectations. It would not be easy, but it would be theirs. Lord Ashton found her the day before he was scheduled to leave for the capital. She was in the workshop, helping Connor dismantle a complex lock mechanism that needed repairs, when Ashton knocked politely on the doorframe. "Lady Calder, or should I call you Mistress Calder now that you have resigned your diplomatic post? Just Zara is fine." She set down the lock component she had been examining. "What can I do for you, Lord Ashton?" I wanted to say goodbye properly without an audience, and to give you this. He held out a sealed letter. "It is a recommendation letter addressed to the guild masters in several major towns. It explains that you are learning an honorable trade and that you should be given the same opportunities as any other apprentice. It also makes clear that any prejudice against you on account of your species will be considered a personal insult to me." Zara took the letter, genuinely touched. "Thank you. That is incredibly generous. It is the least I can do. You were honest with me, even when it would have been easier to be polite. I respect that." He glanced at Connor, who was watching the exchange with wary curiosity. "Take care of her, Jensen. She is worth 10 of anyone else in that ballroom." "I know," Connor said simply. Ashton nodded and left without further ceremony. Zara opened the letter and read it quickly, then showed it to Connor. "This will actually be very helpful," he said, scanning the contents. "A recommendation from nobility carries weight with the guilds, even if you are an orc. It might smooth our path considerably." "He is a better man than I gave him credit for," Zara admitted. "I hope he finds someone who appreciates him properly." "I am sure he will. Men like that always land on their feet." They finished packing that evening and loaded Connor's tools and personal belongings into a hired wagon. The viceroy provided them with provisions for the journey and a letter of his own, recommending Connor's services to potential clients. Whatever personal disappointment he felt about Zara's resignation, he was gracious enough not to make their departure difficult. On their last morning at the manor, Zara stood in the workshop one final time, looking around at the space that had become so important to her. This was where she had learned what she actually wanted from life, where she had fallen in love, where she had finally found the courage to choose her own path. She would miss it, but she was also eager to move forward. "Ready?" Connor asked from the doorway. "Ready," Zara confirmed. They left the estate at dawn, the wagon rattling over the dirt roads toward their new future. The journey took 4 days, through rolling hills and small villages, and Zara found herself enjoying the travel far more than she had expected. There was something freeing about being untethered from diplomatic obligations, about being able to stop whenever they wanted to admire a view or explore an interesting landmark. The town they had chosen was called Millbrook, a prosperous market center that served the surrounding farming communities. It was large enough to support skilled craftsmen but small enough that everyone knew their neighbors. Connor had already arranged to rent a building that could serve as both workshop and living quarters, and they spent their first week in town getting settled and introducing themselves to the local merchants and guild representatives. The reception was mixed. Some people were welcoming, interested in Connor's skills and willing to overlook Zara's orcish heritage. Others were suspicious or outright hostile, making it clear that they did not approve of mixed-species relationships and would not be giving them any business. But Ashton's letter helped, as did Connor's own growing reputation. Within a month, they had enough work to keep them busy, and Zara was learning the trade with remarkable speed. They were married in early spring, in a simple ceremony at the local chapel with only a handful of witnesses. Zara wore a practical dress that she could work in rather than elaborate diplomatic silks, and Connor commissioned a pair of matching silver rings from a local jeweler. The priest who performed the ceremony was an old man who had seen enough of life not to be bothered by species differences, and he spoke movingly about the importance of choosing love over duty and following one's own heart. "I never thought I would be here," Zara said that evening as they sat together in their small but comfortable living quarters above the workshop. "6 months ago, I was a diplomat drowning in obligations I did not want. Now I am a clockmaker's apprentice and wife, and I have never been happier." "No regrets?" Connor asked, pulling her closer. "None. What about you? Any regrets about tying yourself to a scandal-causing orc who derailed your quiet life?" "Only that I did not kiss you weeks earlier and save us both some angst." He pressed a kiss to her forehead. "You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Zara Calder." "Well, Zara Jensen now." "Zara Jensen," she repeated, testing out the name. "I like that. It sounds like someone who belongs here, not someone who is just visiting." "You do belong here, you belong with me." Summer came, bringing long days and steady work. Zara proved to have a real talent for the precision work that clockmaking required, and Connor began trusting her with increasingly complex projects. They developed an easy partnership, working side by side during the day and spending their evenings planning for the future. "I want to design our own clock," Connor said one evening as they shared a simple meal of bread and cheese. "Not just repair other people's work, but create something entirely new. Maybe a tower clock for the town square, something that would last for generations." "That sounds ambitious and expensive." "It would be both, but I think we could do it if we saved up and planned carefully. A really well-made clock could establish our reputation permanently. People would come from all over the region to see it." Then let us do it. Zara raised her cup in a toast. To ambitious projects and the fools who attempt them. They worked on the design throughout the fall and winter, refining the plans and gathering materials. The town council, intrigued by the proposal, agreed to commission the clock with payment to be rendered upon completion. It was a risky arrangement, as it meant they would be investing their own time and resources up front with no guarantee of success. But it was also exactly the kind of challenge they both craved. The project took 18 months from initial design to final installation. There were setbacks and mistakes, moments when they were sure they had miscalculated something critical and would have to start over. But they persevered, supporting each other through the frustrations and celebrating each small victory. And when the clock was finally installed in the town square and began keeping time with perfect accuracy, the sense of accomplishment was overwhelming. "We did it," Zara said, staring up at the tower where their creation now resided. "We actually did it." "You did most of the gear work," Connor pointed out. "I could not have finished it without you. We are a good team. The best." The clock brought them exactly the recognition Connor had hoped for. Commissions began arriving from neighboring towns, requests for both repairs and new installations. They had to hire 2 apprentices to keep up with the demand, and the workshop expanded to fill the entire ground floor of their building. 2 years after they had married, Zara realized she was pregnant. The discovery filled her with a mixture of joy and terror. She had never really thought about having children, had not allowed herself to imagine that kind of future when she was trapped in diplomatic obligations. But now, with Connor and their shared life, it felt right. "Are you happy about this?" she asked him when she finally worked up the courage to tell him. "I know we have never really discussed children." Connor's face lit up with an expression of pure delight. "Happy, Zara, I am thrilled." "Terrified but thrilled. We are going to be parents. We have no idea what we are doing." "No one does at first. We will figure it out together the same way we have figured out everything else." Their daughter was born in early autumn, a perfect healthy baby with green skin, tiny tusks just beginning to show, and her father's brown hair. They named her Alara, and she became the center of their world. Zara continued working in the workshop, often with Alara strapped to her back in a sling, and Connor proved to be a devoted and patient father. "She has your eyes," he said one evening as he rocked the baby to sleep, "and possibly your stubbornness." "She refused to sleep for 3 hours straight today." "That is definitely from my side of the family," Zara agreed. "My mother says I was the most difficult baby she ever dealt with. I believe it." Life settled into a comfortable rhythm. The workshop prospered, their reputation grew, and Alara developed into a bright, curious toddler who loved nothing more than playing with gears and springs under her parents' watchful eyes. Zara received occasional letters from her homeland, stiff formal communications from her council that made it clear they had never really forgiven her for choosing her own path. But she also received warmer letters from friends and family members who supported her decision, and those made up for the council's ongoing disapproval. 3 years after Alara was born, Zara gave birth to a second daughter, Nora. This one had more human features but still clearly showed her orcish heritage, and she was calmer than her older sister, content to observe the world with solemn dark eyes. The workshop became louder and more chaotic, filled with the sounds of children playing and the constant ticking of various clocks in different stages of assembly. "Our life is not what I expected," Connor said one evening, as they sat together watching their daughters play with a collection of harmless clock parts he had set aside for them. "But it is so much better than anything I imagined, even with all the chaos and noise." Especially with the chaos and noise. This is what a real home feels like. Not quiet and empty, but full of life and love and possibility. Zara leaned against him, feeling utterly content. She had given up her diplomatic career, defied her counsel, and created a scandal that was probably still being discussed in certain circles. And in return, she had gained everything that actually mattered. A partner who loved her unconditionally, work that challenged and fulfilled her, children who were growing up free from the weight of political expectations, and a life that was entirely her own. Years later, when people asked Zara about her choice to kiss Connor in front of the entire court, to choose a humble craftsman over a royal suitor, she always gave the same answer. It was the easiest decision I ever made. Because I knew, even before that kiss, that Connor was the person I wanted to build a life with. Everything else was just having the courage to make that choice public and refusing to let anyone else tell me I was wrong. And she never regretted it, not for a single moment. The life she and Connor built together was filled with love, laughter, honest work, and the deep satisfaction of choosing one's own path. Their clocks kept time for generations across the region, each one a testament to the precision and care they brought to everything they did. Their daughters grew up to be strong, confident women who learned early that love and loyalty mattered more than rank or title. Sometimes Zara would stand in their workshop, surrounded by the familiar smells of oil and metal, watching Connor explain some intricate mechanism to one of their daughters, and feel overwhelmed with gratitude. She had been given so many choices in her life, so many paths that others tried to push her down. But the only choice that had ever truly been hers was the one she made in that ballroom, when she refused to be anyone other than herself and chose the life she actually wanted. That was the choice that defined everything that came after. And it had led her here to this workshop, this family, this beautiful, complicated, perfectly imperfect life that she would not trade for anything in the world. The seasons continued their endless cycle, and the workshop continued to prosper. Connor and Zara grew older together, their skills deepening with experience, their partnership strengthening with each shared challenge. Their daughters learned the trade, though Alara eventually chose to study medicine, while Nora stayed on to take over the workshop when her parents were ready to step back. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Connor presented Zara with a pocket watch he had been working on in secret for months. It was the most beautiful thing she had ever seen, with an intricately engraved case showing two figures working side by side at a bench, surrounded by gears and springs. Inside, the mechanism was a masterpiece of miniature engineering, keeping time with absolute precision. "This represents us," Connor said, as Zara turned the watch over in her hands, admiring every detail. "Working together, building something that lasts. I wanted you to have something that reminded you of what we have created. As if I could ever forget." Zara kissed him, this man who had seen past her diplomatic role to the person underneath, who had taught her his trade and built a life with her, who had never once made her regret choosing him. "You are still the best decision I ever made. Even better than learning clockmaking. Even better than that, though it is a close second." They laughed together, comfortable and easy in the way that only came from decades of true partnership. Outside, the town square clock chimed the hour, their creation marking time for everyone in Millbrook. And inside their workshop, surrounded by the evidence of their shared life, Zara and Connor held each other close and were grateful for every choice that had led them to this moment. The story that began with a kiss in front of a scandalized court had become something far more meaningful. It had become a marriage built on mutual respect, a business built on shared skill, a family built on love. It had become proof that choosing one's own path, however frightening or uncertain, was always worth it in the end. And that was the best happy ending Zara could have imagined.